out of time here in Norway. I got to get back and get the boat back to work and catch some cod.
In the icy Alaskan Sea, something unthinkable happened. Fishermen pulled up an otherworldly, glowing orb from the depths. The seasoned crew, used to battling brutal waves and bone-chilling winds, stood frozen as the mysterious object pulsed with an eerie blue light. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen, and it wasn't just the glow. It felt alive. Let us unravel this mystery that could change everything we think we know about our planet, or beyond, between Earth and the unknown. The Alaskan Sea is no joke. It's wild, icy, and downright scary. But it's also the spot where tough-as-nails fishermen make their living, braving eliminate waves and freezing winds to haul in crab pots. And just when they thought they'd seen it all, a strange, unearthly glow erupted from the depths, something no one could explain and no one was prepared for. A crabbing boat rocking in the middle of nowhere with fog so thick it looks like the world just ended. The crew is geared up and ready as usual. They drop their heavy pots into the cold, black water, hoping for a good catch. Hours later, they start pulling the pots back up, same old routine. But then, one pot doesn't come up quite right. It's heavier than usual and the winch is groaning like it's lifting something way bigger than a pile of crabs. When the pot finally breaks the surface, everyone freezes. It's glowing. Not like a tiny glow, this thing is lit up, casting this eerie blue light over the deck. The guys on board have seen a lot, but nothing like this. At first they're thinking maybe it's algae or something weird from the ocean. But nope, this thing's different. Inside the pot is a strange basketball-sized orb. It's shiny like liquid metal and it's pulsing with light, almost like it's alive. Now the crew is split. Some of them are saying, "Chuck it back overboard, this is bad news." Others think they've hit the jackpot, like this could be worth a ton or maybe even make them famous. The captain, a guy who's seen it all but is just superstitious enough to be cautious, decides they'll keep it but locked up tight in a storage bin. They've got crab to catch and a job to finish.
It's gonna be a little dicey there, guys. If you hear me yell, obviously take...
As the trip goes on, the weirdness ramps up. The orb starts humming, not loud, but enough that you can feel it in your chest. It's almost like it's alive, watching them or something. Some of the crew start having bizarre dreams. Others refuse to go anywhere near the storage bin, acting like it's cursed. The vibe on the boat shifts from just another day to what the heck is going on here. When they finally get back to port, the fishermen waste no time calling in experts. Scientists from a nearby lab show up with fancy gadgets, all fired up to study this thing. Tests reveal the orb isn't made of anything found on Earth. Now the speculation goes into overdrive. Is it alien tech? Some deep-sea creature we've never seen? Nobody knows, and that's what makes it so wild. The news spreads fast. Suddenly, the fishermen are at the center of a media frenzy. Some people think they've uncovered proof of extraterrestrial life. Others are calling it a hoax. The guys who found it are just trying to wrap their heads around the whole thing, caught between being local heroes and dealing with skeptics accusing them of making it all up. The Alaskan Sea has always been a place of extremes. The waves crash like thunder, the wind cuts like a knife, and the cold seeps into your bones. For the fishermen who work these waters, every day is a test of grit and determination. They battle nature head-on, chasing a livelihood in one of the harshest environments on Earth. It's not just a job, it's survival. But what happens when the sea gives up something no one's ever seen before? That's the kind of story that changes everything. Imagine being on that boat, rocking and swaying under a blanket of fog so thick you can barely see the bow. The crew is seasoned, used to the relentless rhythm of the job. They're up before dawn, hands frozen to the bone, muscles aching from hauling heavy pots. It's hard work, but they're tough. They've got routines, jokes, and an unspoken bond that comes from facing danger together. This day starts like any other, with the roar of the engine and the hiss of salt spray. But by the end, nothing will feel normal again. The first few pots come up as expected. They're heavy with crabs, the kind that bring good money at the docks. Spirits are high and the men work with practiced efficiency.
Thank you, God.
They know the drill: pull, sort, reset. The rhythm of the work is almost comforting, a steady beat in a chaotic world. But then they hit that one pot. The winch strains, the line tightens, and everyone feels it. Something's different. When the pot breaks the surface, glowing like a beacon in the fog, it's like time stops. This isn't just a weird catch, it's otherworldly. The orb sits in the pot, radiating a blue light that seems to pulse with a life of its own. The men are drawn to it, but there's also a sense of unease, like they've stumbled onto something they shouldn't have. It's not just the light, it's the way it feels, the hum that seems to vibrate through the air. The orb commands attention, a presence that can't be ignored. The decision to keep the orb isn't an easy one. Fishermen are practical folk, but they're also superstitious. The sea is unpredictable, and they've learned to respect its mysteries. Still, the curiosity is too strong to resist. They secure the orb, trying to focus on the job at hand, but it's not that simple. The orb's presence changes everything. It's like a shadow over the trip, a constant reminder that they've crossed into unknown territory. By the time they're back on land, the orb is all anyone can talk about. Scientists swarm the boat, eager to study the strange object. The tests are inconclusive but mind-blowing. The orb's material doesn't match anything in the known world. It's not just rare, it's impossible. Theories fly faster than the tide. Could it be alien? A deep-sea creature? Some kind of natural phenomenon no one's discovered yet? The fishermen watch as their lives are turned upside down, caught in a whirlwind of attention and speculation. The media frenzy is relentless. Reporters want interviews, skeptics want proof, and everyone has an opinion. For the fishermen, it's overwhelming. They went out looking for crabs and came back with a mystery that's bigger than anything they've ever faced. The questions don't stop, and the answers are nowhere to be found. All they know is that they pulled something extraordinary from the depths, something that defies explanation. For the crew, life goes on, but it's not the same. The sea, once a place of routine and hard work, now feels like a gateway to the unknown. Every trip out is tinged with a sense of wonder and unease. The orb's memory lingers, a constant reminder of that day when the sea offered up one of its deepest secrets. The Alaskan waters, vast and mysterious, hold many stories. This one is a testament to the power and mystery of the world beneath the waves, a story that will echo for generations to come. In the icy Alaskan waters, a routine catch leads to something no one can explain. A haul to remember. As weeks turned into months, the mystery deepened. Scientists continued their research, publishing papers and sharing their findings with the world. Theories about the object's origin became more elaborate. Some suggested it was a fragment of a long-lost civilization, evidence of advanced technology that predates recorded history. Others speculated it was extraterrestrial, a piece of a spacecraft that had fallen to Earth and been hidden beneath the waves for centuries. Despite the excitement, there were no definitive answers. The object remained in mystery, a puzzle that refused to be solved. For the crew of the Deadliest catch, it was a constant reminder of the ocean's secrets. They'd always known the sea was unpredictable, but this discovery had shown them just how little they truly understood. The return trips to the fishing grounds were different now. The crew worked with the same efficiency, the same determination, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation in the air. Each time they set out, they couldn't help but wonder if they'd find something else, another piece of the puzzle that was the glowing object. The ocean, as always, kept its secrets close. Fishing is a tough business, demanding physical strength, mental fortitude, and a willingness to face danger head-on. The crew knew this all too well. Their days were long, their nights often sleepless, and the cold was relentless. But they also knew the rewards. The satisfaction of a full hold, the pride of a job well done, and the knowledge that they were part of a tradition that stretched back generations.
That's pretty good. That's some big pots.
Oh my God. I'm counting it. Woo!
The glowing object had added a new layer to their lives. It was a story they'd tell for years to come, a moment that had set them apart from every other fishing crew on the Bering Sea. It was a reminder that even in a world as harsh and unforgiving as the ocean, there's still room for wonder, curiosity, and discovery. As they prepared for another season, the crew couldn't help but think about what the future might hold. The sea is vast, its depths largely unexplored. Who knows what else might be down there, waiting to be found? The glowing object was just one mystery in a world full of them, a small piece of a much larger puzzle. And for the crew of the Deadliest Catch, that was enough to keep them coming back, season after season, ready to face whatever the ocean decided to throw their way. The fishermen of the Bering Sea were no strangers to the extraordinary. Every trip out to sea came with its own dose of chaos. Crabs that wouldn't bite, waves taller than their boats, and the constant fight against the freezing wind. But this time, they brought back something that left even the hardiest of them scratching their heads. It started like any other haul. The pots were heavy, the crew was grumbling, and the crabs were plentiful. But as they emptied one particular pot, something clattered onto the deck that wasn't a crustacean. It was a chunk of metal, smooth and polished, with strange symbols etched all over its surface. Nobody knew what to make of it, but everyone knew one thing: it didn't belong there. By the time they docked back at Dutch Harbor, the story had already started spreading. The Deadliest Catch crew found something weird, people whispered at the docks. The crew was tired but restless, their minds spinning with what they'd pulled up. It wasn't treasure, not in the gold and silver sense, but it felt important. Captain Jonathan made the call to keep the object under wraps, at least for now. It was stashed away in the shipyard, covered with a tarp and guarded from curious eyes. But secrecy only added fuel to the fire. Locals, reporters, and even rival fishermen swarmed Dutch Harbor, desperate to get a glimpse. Theories ran wild. Some claimed it was part of an old shipwreck, maybe a relic from a long-lost voyage. Others said it had fallen from space, a piece of a satellite, or the more imaginative, a UFO. The symbols on the object were unlike anything anyone had seen before. They weren't letters, not in any language the experts knew. They weren't random scratches either. They looked deliberate, as if they were meant to tell a story. As the days passed, the unease among the crew grew. They couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something that should have stayed hidden. The object seemed almost alive, like it was watching them, waiting. Nights at the shipyard grew eerier, the strange artifact casting long, unexplainable shadows under the dim lights. One night, as a storm battered Dutch Harbor, Captain Jonathan found himself drawn back to the shipyard. Rain pelted his jacket as he pulled the tarp off the object, running his fingers over the smooth, glowing surface. The markings seemed to shift under his touch, almost like they were trying to speak to him. He stood there for what felt like hours, the howling wind around him fading into the background. The rest of the crew wasn't faring much better. Sleep didn't come easy, and when it did, it brought strange dreams, images of endless oceans, towering waves, and those same glowing symbols. They couldn't escape it, not on land, not at sea. The object had wormed its way into their minds. Experts were called in. Scientists, historians, even a self-proclaimed paranormal investigator. Each had their own theory, but none could explain the object's origin. The symbols didn't match any known language. The metal wasn't like anything found on Earth. And then there was the weight of it, far heavier than it looked, almost as if it were holding a piece of the sea itself. Theories turned from curious to outright bizarre. Was it a message from another world? A piece of technology from an ancient, advanced civilization? Or just some odd, man-made object that ended up in the wrong place? The lack of answers only deepened the mystery. Some of the crew started to regret bringing it aboard. "Maybe we should have just left it down there," one of them muttered during a rare quiet moment at the local bar. The others nodded, sipping their drinks in uneasy silence. The ocean was vast and full of secrets. Maybe this was one they weren't meant to uncover, but curiosity had a way of digging in. Despite their reservations, the crew couldn't leave it alone. They made trips to the shipyard, running their hands over the strange object, hoping for some kind of answer. Instead, they got more questions. The object started changing, its glow growing brighter, its surface warmer to the touch. It felt alive. Then one day, a stranger arrived in Dutch Harbor. He wasn't a fisherman. His clean suit and polished shoes made that clear. He introduced himself as an investigator, someone who specialized in unusual finds. Word had spread farther than they'd thought, and now outsiders were coming to see for themselves. Captain Jonathan was reluctant, but eventually agreed to show him the object. The investigator's face remained neutral as he studied it, taking notes and muttering under his breath. When he finally left, he offered no answers, only a cryptic promise to be in touch. His visit left the crew even more uneasy. What did he know that he wasn't sharing? Life seemed to return to normal, but the crew knew this was far from over. Secrets of the Bering Sea. After that, things only got stranger. People started watching the shipyard, locals, reporters, and a few faces that didn't belong to either group. The crew began to feel like they were being followed, their every move scrutinized. The object had become a magnet for attention, and not all of it was welcome. Weeks turned into months, and the crew's lives never quite returned to normal. They went back to fishing, but the object was always in the back of their minds. It was a weight, an unanswered question they couldn't shake. And deep down, they all knew one thing: whatever it wasn't finished with them. The sea had given them a mystery, and mysteries have a way of demanding answers. Whether they liked it or not, the fishermen of the Deadliest catch were now part of a story far bigger than they'd ever imagined. Each new trip to sea felt different, weighed down by what they'd left back at Dutch Harbor. The rhythm of their work, the cranking of the winches, the sloshing of seawater on the deck felt less familiar, as if the ocean itself had shifted. They tried to focus, pulling up pots and sorting crabs, but their minds always drifted back to the object. Jonathan especially couldn't let it go. Every night he found himself returning to the shipyard, standing in the quiet darkness, staring at the strange artifact. He noticed changes, subtle shifts in the glow, new patterns emerging on its surface. It felt like the object was trying to communicate, though he couldn't begin to guess what it was saying. The crew started to notice changes in themselves too. Little things at first: a heightened awareness, sharper senses, an uncanny ability to predict the weather or the movements of the sea. Then came the dreams, vivid and unrelenting, of places they'd never seen and creatures they couldn't name. They stopped talking about it openly, afraid of what it might mean, but the tension among them was palpable. Dutch Harbor began to change as well. The town felt more crowded, more watched. Strangers appeared more frequently, some openly asking questions about the object, others lurking in the shadows. The crew's family started to notice too, asking why reporters were hanging around their homes, why men in suits were parked down the street. One evening, as Jonathan walked to the shipyard, he saw headlights in the distance. A black car idled near the fence, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. He hesitated but continued on, pulling the tarp off the object and running his hand over its surface. The glow was stronger now, pulsing faintly under his touch. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting someone to approach, but the car stayed where it was. The next day, the car was gone, but new rumors had started spreading. Some said the government was involved, that they wanted to take the object for themselves. Others claimed it was cursed, that the crew had brought something back that would doom them all. Jonathan dismissed the rumors, but the weight of them lingered. The object's changes became more pronounced. It began to emit a faint hum, barely audible but impossible to ignore. The glow grew brighter at night, casting eerie patterns on the walls of the shipyard. The crew's unease turned to fear, but they couldn't bring themselves to get rid of it. It felt like it belonged to them now, like they were meant to guard it. As the weeks stretched on, Jonathan made a decision. He called a meeting with the crew, laying everything out on the table. They needed answers, and they couldn't wait for someone else to provide them. They would take the object back out to sea, back to where they'd found it, and see if the ocean held any clues. The day they set out was clear and cold, the kind of weather that sharpened the senses. The crew worked silently, their movements purposeful. The object was secured on deck, glowing faintly under the sunlight. Jonathan stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the horizon. He didn't know what they would find, but he felt a strange sense of purpose, as if they were finally on the right path. When they reached the spot where they'd found the object, the sea was unnaturally calm. The crew lowered it over the side, watching as it disappeared into the depths. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the water began to churn, glowing faintly where the object had sunk. The crew stared, transfixed, as a column of light shot up from the ocean, illuminating the night sky. The light was blinding, and the hum they'd heard before grew louder, resonating through the boat. Jonathan felt his heart race as the symbols from the object appeared in the light, spinning and shifting, forming patterns that seemed to speak directly to him. He couldn't understand the message, but he felt it, a deep, primal connection to something far greater than himself. When the light finally faded, the sea was calm again. The object was gone, and the crew stood in stunned silence, their minds struggling to process what they'd just witnessed. Jonathan turned to his crew, seeing the same awe and fear reflected in their eyes. Whatever had just happened, it had changed them. They were no longer just fishermen, they were part of something much larger. The journey back to Dutch Harbor was quiet. The crew spoke little, each lost in their thoughts. When they docked, the town was waiting, eager for answers, but the crew had none to give. The object was gone, but its impact lingered, etched into their minds and hearts. As the weeks turned to months, the crew tried to return to normal, but the experience had left its mark. They couldn't forget the light, the symbols, the feeling of connection. The ocean was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of mystery, a reminder of how much they didn't know. Jonathan found himself returning to the spot where they'd left the object, staring out at the water and wondering what it all meant. He knew they'd been part of something extraordinary, something they might never fully understand, and though the object was gone, its presence remained, a quiet reminder of the secrets the sea still held. The fishermen of the Bering Sea had always been resilient, but now they carried with them a deeper understanding of the world's mysteries. They had faced the unknown and returned, forever changed by what they had seen. And as they continued their work, pulling crabs from the depths, they couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the ocean might reveal. It started like any other day on the frigid waters of the Bering Sea. The fishermen, rugged and worn from years of battling waves and hauling nets, weren't expecting anything out of the ordinary. They were out to catch crab, not make history. But as fate would have it, the sea had a surprise waiting for them, something that would flip their world upside down. The crew was curious, but also wary. They hauled it onto the deck, careful not to damage their equipment or themselves. The thing was smooth and cold to the touch, with faint grooves and symbols etched across its surface. It didn't look man-made, at least not by any man they'd ever known. They stood there staring, unsure of what to do next. Jonathan, the captain, decided they couldn't just leave it behind. He made the call to bring it back to the shipyard. It felt important, like they'd stumbled onto something that shouldn't be ignored. And big it was, maybe too big. They didn't know it yet, but their lives were about to take a turn they never signed up for. When they docked, the shipyard seemed eerily quiet, but it didn't stay that way for long. Soon, dark cars started showing up, parking across the street like vultures circling a carcass. Men in suits watched from a distance, pretending to be inconspicuous, but failing miserably. The crew noticed, and unease settled over them like a heavy fog. It felt like they were being watched, like someone was keeping tabs on them, and not in a friendly way. Jonathan's gut told him they'd messed with something they shouldn't have. He couldn't help but wonder if they should have just left the object where they found it, deep beneath the waves. But it was too late now. The thing was out of the ocean and sitting right there, drawing attention they didn't want. The crew tried to go about their business, but the feeling of being watched never left. It was like a shadow that clung to them no matter where they went. As days passed, the strange object became harder to ignore. It wasn't just a curiosity anymore, it was a problem. The crew argued about what to do. Some wanted to get rid of it, to dump it back into the sea and wash their hands of the whole mess. Others felt like they had a duty to figure out what it was, to see this through to the end. After all, they'd pulled it from the deep. Wasn't it their responsibility to uncover its secrets? The days that followed were tense. The crew stuck to themselves, keeping the object hidden and avoiding unnecessary attention. Yet the sensation of being watched never went away. It gnawed at their nerves, a persistent unease that made even the bravest among them jump at shadows. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound outside their windows felt like a threat. The next day, a team arrived. They didn't waste any time. They loaded the object onto a truck and drove off without so much as a hint of where they were taking it. The crew watched in silence as it disappeared down the road, a mix of relief and regret washing over them. They'd been part of something extraordinary, something that would stick with them forever, but now it was out of their hands. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could get after something like that. The crew went back to fishing, back to the sea they knew so well, but the memory of the object lingered. Late at night, under the stars, they'd talk about it, wondering where it came from, what it was, and what would happen to it now. They knew they'd probably never get the answers they wanted, but they also knew they'd been part of something special. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Who decides what secrets stay hidden and who gets to uncover the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.